Do I believe in UFOs or extraterrestrial visitors? I'm not authorized to answer that question. Where shall I begin? UFO. First, remember what the U stands for in UFO. Now, there's a fascinating frailty of the human mind that psychologists know all about, and it's called argument from ignorance. And this is how it goes. You ready? Somebody sees lights flashing in the sky. They've never seen it before. They don't understand what it is. They say, a UFO. The U stands for unidentified. So they say, I don't know what it is. It must be aliens from outer space visiting from another planet. Well, if you don't know what it is, that's where your conversation should stop. You don't then say, it must be anything. Okay? That's what argument from ignorance is. It's common. I'm not blaming anybody. Psychologists know all about it, and it may relate to our burning need to have to know stuff because we're uncomfortable, steeped in ignorance. You can't be a scientist if you're uncomfortable with ignorance, because we live at the boundary between what is known and unknown in the universe. Unlike what journalists write. You ever see journalists? Any journalists here? You go to journalists. You go to journalists. All articles about science discoveries begin. Scientists now have to go back to the drawing board. As though we're sitting up in our office, you know, masters of the universe. It's like, oops, somebody discovered something. No, we're always at the drawing board. If you're not at the drawing board, you're not making discoveries. You're something else. So, the public, it appears, seems to have this burning need to have an answer to what is unknown. And so you go from an abject statement of ignorance to an abject statement of certainty. So, that is operating within us. Let's start there. Second, we know, not only from research in psychology, but simple empirical evidence in the history of science, that the lowest form of evidence that exists in this world is eyewitness testimony. Which is scary because that's some of the highest form of evidence in the court of law. But we know from second grade. Where's my guy from second grade? Get up to the microphone for a minute. Grab the microphone. Grab the microphone. In your classes, have you done the famous experiment where you play telephone and you line up all your kids in class and one person starts with a story and then you hear it and you repeat it to the next person and the next person? Have you done that in class yet?
Yes.
You've done that experiment? Because what happens by the time you get to the last person and they retell the story? What happens?
It's like completely different.
It's completely different. Completely different, okay? Because the conveyance of information was relying on eyewitness testimony, which in that case is ear witness testimony. And so, thank you. So we know that. So he knows it. He's in second grade. All right. So, actually he should be in 12th grade as we've established. So now, it wouldn't matter if you saw a flying saucer. In science, even if you have something less controversial than a flying saucer, if you come into my lab and you say, you gotta believe me, I saw it, and you're one of my fellow scientists, I say, go back, go home. Go back until you have some other kind of evidence that's not just, you saw it. Okay? Because human perception system is rife with all ways of getting it wrong. Okay? But we don't like thinking of ourselves that way. We have high opinions of our human biology when in fact we should not. I'll give you an example of how it reveals itself. We've all bought and enjoyed books called Optical Illusions, right? Well, we all love optical illusions, but that's not what they should call the book. They should call them brain failures, okay? Because that's what it is. It is a complete failure of human perception, all right? All it takes is a few sketches that are cleverly done. Your brain can't figure it out, all right? So, we are poor data-taking devices. That's why we have such a thing as science, because we have machines that don't care what side of the bed they woke up in the morning, don't care what they said to their spouse that day, doesn't care whether they had their morning caffeine. They'll get the data right, okay? So, maybe you did see visitors from another part of the galaxy. I need more than your eyewitness testimony. And in modern times, I need more than your photograph, which Photoshop probably has a UFO button today. Like, stick it in, right? So, on your computer. So, here's what you do. I'm not saying we haven't been visited. I'm saying the evidence thus far brought forth does not satisfy the standards of evidence that any scientist would require for any other claim that you're going to walk into the lab with. So here's what I recommend. Next time you're abducted, because I'm ready for this. I'm ready, okay? I get abducted, I'm ready, okay? So you're there, you're like on the slab, because they always do like the sex experiments on you, on the flying saucer. So there you are, and they're poking at you. Here's what you do. You ready? You tell the alien, you're gonna be alien for this, right? So you're poking me, all right? So then I
Finally,
say,
I'm on this side of the equation.
okay, so I say, hey, look over there. And then he looks over there, you quickly like snatch something off the shelf, put it in a pocket, and then lay back. All right? Then you're done, you come back, and say, look what I got. Okay, I like stole the ashtray off the shelf of the flying saucer. And then you bring that to the lab. And it's not about eyewitness testimony at that point, because you'll have something of alien manufacture. And anything you pull off of a flying saucer that crossed the galaxy is gonna be interesting, okay? Because even objects within our own culture. I got this device here, okay, the iPhone. 10 years ago, they would have resurrected the witch burning laws had you pulled this thing out, okay? And that's in our own culture. Our own culture produced this over a 10-year span. So if there's some technology that crossed the galaxy, that's gonna be some serious stuff to look at in the lab. Then we can have the conversation. Until then, I can't, I'm sorry. Go ahead, keep trying to find them. I'm not gonna stop you. But get ready for that time you are abducted, because I'm gonna be looking for your evidence when that happens. And my last point on that is, there are people who look up all the time. Like, for example, the community of amateur astronomers in the world. I was an amateur astronomer. We look up, we come out of a building, we look up. Doesn't matter, we're looking up. UFO sightings are not higher among amateur astronomers than they are in the general public. In fact, they're lower. You say, well, why is that so? Well, because we know what the hell we're looking at. We know. Do you know? I don't. Because we study this stuff. Do you know there was a UFO sighting reported by a police officer, because we think that because you have a badge or you're a pilot or you're whatever, that your testimony is somehow better than that of an average person. It's all bad because we're human, okay? So there was a police officer who was tracking a UFO that was swaying back and forth in the sky, okay? Reported on the hot, they're in one of the, what do you call the car? The squad car, chasing a UFO, and the UFO's moving back and forth like this, okay? Later it turned out the cop car was chasing Venus, and he was driving on a curved road. But was so distracted by Venus, he thought Venus was the one moving, and he wasn't even thinking that he was doing this. So, I have seen things which, without my background in meteorology and astronomy and looking up, I would have reported to the police department. I would have. Like orographic clouds that form above huge mountains that are circular. And they're above a tall mountain, which means wherever you are, the sun can set for you before it has set for the cloud, darkening the skies, yet the cloud is now illuminated by sunset colors, which are what? Red, yellow, orange, and it's circular. There have been reports of hovering circular UFOs with light beams on them because people are looking at this cloud formation on top of mountains. So, maybe we have been visited by aliens. Maybe they've even landed. But why do they land in like the farmer's yard and not like Times Square, all right? And then I worried, like maybe they had landed in Times Square, but nobody took notice. You know, because that's the really big problem there. And so there's a huge answer to it because there's a lot built into it. So here's another concern I had. Oh, you said about movies earlier? Remember Close Encounters of the Third Kind?
Absolutely.
Remember that? And the aliens come in this big flying saucer?
Sure.
Okay, and what do? We turn on runway lights for it. I'm thinking, flying saucers don't need runway lights. They're flying saucers, for goodness sake. If you put a bullseye or something.
You did need them when we landed on the moon.
Don't put runway lights for this thing. Then, when you go to Roswell and there's like crashed flying saucers, I'm thinking, if the alien came across the galaxy and couldn't land a damn spaceship, I don't want to meet the aliens. They're stupid aliens, all right? You at least land on Earth, for goodness sake. Don't tell me you came across the galaxy, you can't land on Earth? Go home. Bring me somebody who can, then I'll have the conversation. Anyhow, so those are my opinions on the subject. We got the Big Bang. That's been going for a while. Now, not everybody's happy with the Big Bang. You found this billboard. So apparently, God isn't happy with the Big Bang. I would have thought he'd be totally cool with it, but apparently not. I found this bumper sticker in New Mexico. The Big Bang Theory. God spoke, bang, it happens. This one is okay with the Big Bang, but that God did the Big Bang. So people are still trying to wrestle with this. Here's what we know. This is the entire universe in one slide. Quantum fluctuations, birth, an entire explosion, rapid expansion, we call it inflation. That's an idea that came about in the 1970s when there was inflation, severe inflation in our economy. So the word had a lot of currency back then. Now it's like you're inflating a tire, like what are you doing, you know? There is the baby picture of the universe. That's that sort of aqua surface there. That's sort of the imprint of what happened in the very earliest moments, writ in the background sky. There it is, the cosmic microwave background, a record of the earliest moments of the Big Bang. Then it takes a little time to make your first stars. We call it the dark ages. Stars are made, galaxies mature. We come up to the present day, 13.7 billion years later. And that telescope, we can't see the whole name, it's called WMAP, Wilkinson Microwave Anisotropy Probe. They clearly didn't want anyone to pronounce that or remember it. I would just call it the Big Bang Machine. That made this measurement. And so it's a pretty coherent picture that we have of the origin of the universe. And here's that map that the space probe shown. And so this is a record of the earliest moments of the universe. And it tells us what the universe was up to. And data agree, we're all pretty happy with this, and we're kind of moving on. If you look at the chemical ingredients of life itself, you remember from biology class, we're mostly water. And good old water is H2O, 2 hydrogens, 1 oxygen. And if you could look at the sort of the element budget of life, hydrogen is number 1, as expressed in the water molecule. The number 2 in the human body is oxygen, turns out. Number 3 in the human body is carbon. 4 is nitrogen. 5, you find on all lists, is other. Okay, now if you go to the universe, that's the O on the periodic table. You didn't know that? That's not for oxygen, it's for other. So you go into the universe, number 1 ingredient in the universe is hydrogen. That was true in life. Number 2 ingredient in the universe is helium. We don't have that one.
Yeah, it doesn't like anybody.
No, how come? Well, because helium is chemically inert. You can't do anything with it even if you wanted. You can inhale it, okay? And sound like Mickey Mouse, yes. Next in the universe is oxygen. Next, carbon. Next, other. Thank you, in the third row there. So, actually that was the second row. They must be related to the second row here. We are 1-for-1 matchup with the most abundant ingredients in the universe. Of these, carbon is the most chemically fertile element in the entire periodic table. You can make more kinds of molecules with carbon than all other molecules combined. So, if you were going to experiment through the forces of nature with complex chemistry, and you had to pick an element to base it on, carbon is your man. Or your woman, however that goes. Okay, so what I'm saying is, given what carbon is capable of doing, perhaps we shouldn't be so surprised that there's life, because we are carbon-based life. We're just another one of the things carbon has rolled up its sleeve. Maybe life is inevitable, given the abundance of carbon and oxygen and nitrogen and hydrogen in the universe. Try to invert that view. Otherwise, you're left thinking, hey, we're special. You know I would give you right to say you're special? If life on Earth were made of an isotope of bismuth. That stuff is nowhere in the cosmos, and then we're made of it, we're special. Okay? But if we're the most common ingredients of the matter that we know and love, you don't have an argument. And with regard to cell phone use, there's a very important fact of science, and that is the act of measurement. It's a fascinating thing, measurement, because you can never measure anything precisely. That is, with unlimited precision. You can only measure it with the uncertainties of your measuring device. And all you can do in the lab is try to constrain how uncertain that measurement is, but at some level it will always be uncertain. And here's what happens. If you're trying to measure a phenomenon that does not exist, the variations in your measurement will occasionally give you a positive signal, as well as a negative signal. If that positive signal is the idea that maybe A causes B, in this case, cell phones cause cancer, a paper gets written about that result, and then people get concerned that cell phones might cause cancer or power lines might cause cancer. This goes way back. And so, in fact, if you look at the full spate of these studies, even those that they thought not to publish because it was not a positive effect, there's some cases where, in fact, there's less cancer. And so these are the phenomenon of a no result. When you actually have A causing B, the signal is huge. It is huge and it's repeatable in time and in place. With cell phones, that repeatable signal is yet to emerge from the total experiments that are done on it. That being said, if you're worried, almost every cell phone they have the cell phones on your hip and you've got an earpiece. So just do that if you're worried. But otherwise, I can either say the jury is still out or the experimental results are consistent with no effect at all. I don't want the religious person in the lab telling me that God is responsible for what it is they cannot discover. Because look at the hubris of that. You're in the lab and you say, I don't know how this works. And not only that, no one alive on earth knows how this works. And not only that, no one who will ever be born will know how this works. That's kind of audacious when you think about it. And then you put it down and go on to the next problem. If this problem is a cure for Alzheimer's or cancer or whatever else, I don't want them in the science classroom. And so the issue is simply about progress and discovery. And in my recent forays into Washington, well, I've been closer to a community of Republicans than I have ever been in my life, because I grew up in New York City. And in New York City, I think that person is Republican back there. You see? No, not that one, the one behind that person. Yeah, that's a Republican. There's another one. That's in New York. So you grow up this way, and I get sort of baptized into a Republican administration. I had 2 consecutive appointments in the Bush administration, one on aerospace, on the aerospace industry, and one on space exploration. NASA's future, basically. And I realized something, spending that much time in the community of powerful Republicans, that Republicans, above all else, do not want to die poor. So, there's a limit to how far this will go. And I bet most people in this room, even those assembled at this table, were highly concerned about the Dover trial, wondering how that would turn. And I looked at that and I said, I'm not worried, because it's a Republican judge. And in the end, if you put people who are not making discoveries in the science classroom, that is the end of the foundation of your future economy. And so I had a little more confidence than others did because of this sensitivity to the money aspect of it. But we all know tomorrow's economies will be founded on innovations in science and technology, and of course that gets cut short if we lose our civilization, as what happened in Islam in 1100. And the last thought I'll leave you with, which concerns me greatly, if you do the math, okay? Just look, you look at all the Nobel Prize winners there ever were, some even in this room, and ask how many were Muslim. And it's like one, maybe two, okay? I think a second one was in economics. And the one we referred to was described earlier, the co-winner of the Nobel Prize with Professor Weinberg, Abdus Salam. And he's not Middle Eastern Muslim, he's Pakistani Muslim. Okay? Now, how many Nobel Prizes are won by Jews? It's like a fourth of the Nobel Prizes. Okay? Some high fraction of the total. And then you look, how many Muslims are there in the world? It's like 1 billion Muslims. How many Jews? 15 million tops. Okay? So you to ratio these numbers, had Islam not collapsed in its intellectual standing in the year 1100, and you just do the ratios, they would have every single Nobel Prize today. So the fact that it's not only just a few, it's near zero, is deeply worrying. I'm concerned about what brilliance may have expressed itself and did not in that community over the past 1,000 years.